Hi, my name's Mel and welcome back to Bookish Brummy, and this is my weekly video where I review all of the books that I've just read in the last week. Now I'm going to be honest with you, we have been on a really good run for the last couple of months, and I've quite often had 4 stars and 5 stars to tell you about that I've been really excited to read, but this week has been a bad week. It feels like a lot of the stuff that I've picked up, I've come to it and thought, do you know what, this wasn't written for me. So I'm not going to be, there's a couple of books that are okay this week, but there's also a couple that are not. Yeah, this is probably the first time they're actually really going to see me roast some books. But so with that in mind, just bear in mind, these are just my opinions and how I feel about these books. I do appreciate that some of these books have been around a while, or they may have won awards, and lots of people like them. But we don't all have to like the same things. And I've learned a little bit about what I don't like this week. So without further ado, let's start. So I've been doing this reading challenge, and basically this last week and the coming week will be dedicated to trying to finish off that challenge, and I had 4 points left on my reading challenge that I needed to complete, and one of those was read a book where the main character works in IT. This was an extremely difficult one to try and find. I looked all over the internet, and the only thing I could come up with was Neuromancer by William Gibson. So this was published in 1984, and it says on the top that it's part of a trilogy, but actually I think that it might be part of a quadrilogy, because I'm sure I've seen a 4th book. However, I will not be continuing with this series personally. This was a do not finish for me. I decided not to finish this book when I was 77% all the way through it. So yeah, I was at about 260 odd pages. There's only 300 pages in this book, and I just couldn't make myself carry on for the last 40 pages. I'd limped on, I think, for about 100 pages longer than I really wanted to, and I just didn't want to give any more time to it. So I guess we should maybe talk about why. So in this book we are following this guy called Case, and he is living what looks to be in a futuristic version of the world, and we don't recognise the area where he's living as anything like that sort of exists in our common world, because it seems to be all these technological people who are like outcasts for one reason or another, who are like frequenting this bar, which is like where this starts, but this bar is like sitting in this seedy district which is like full of these technological outcasts. I suppose you'd say it was like a really dark, grim version of Silicon Valley, maybe. But anyway, he gets blackmailed to basically start hacking into this mainframe by this person called Armitage. And that's about the most I can really tell you without giving away more of the story. However, it would be difficult for me to give away more of the story because I'm not sure I really understood what was going on in the story. So yeah, as I say, like, the world that they're existing in is not sort of one that you could really relate to in this modern day. There are a lot of characters in this book, and then some of them seem to have nicknames. So then that makes it doubly difficult because somebody might call them one thing but they're also known as something else. So that was hard to keep track of. There are people that seem to be immediately involved in the story, like in the hacking, and then there's people on the outside who are not involved in the hacking. And it's difficult trying to keep straight who means what to whom. And then also there's I didn't really understand what the purpose of the hacking that Case was trying to do was. Like, I understood that he was being blackmailed, so he was doing what was asked of him, to basically so that he could keep up his end of the argument and basically save his life, because obviously he was going to die if he didn't do what they were asking him to do. But I didn't really understand like what they were asking him to do or why. And this hacking is not like just sitting down at a keyboard and hacking into somebody's website or whatever. It's like a physical thing. Like, they seem to sit down at a keyboard and then they seem to be physically in a mainframe somewhere, and then there's like others of them that are in another mainframe somewhere, and somehow they're tracking each other and they can see through each other's eyes, and there's like fighting and stuff going on. you know, and somehow some people get injured, and it's apparently this book did inform the Matrix film. So the Matrix film apparently was born out of this book, and I think that knowing that when I went in did help me ever so slightly to put into context what was going on in some situations, like to visualize it in my head. But this book was obviously ahead of its time in 1984. Some of the technological concepts it's talking about, especially with regards to IT, it just simply was unheard of, I think, in 1984. So for that, I would applaud William Gibson, because he's obviously very imaginative for that. And then obviously The Matrix was an extremely successful film, and I can definitely see how that film has come out of this book. But I couldn't keep up with the story. I found that there's also slang written in there as well, which kind of fits in with their world and the group of people, like the outcasts that they're sort of among. And yeah, I really had to keep going back 3 pages to try and understand, like, what is actually happening now. Are we actually talking to a real person right now? Are we talking to a car? Are we talking to another object? Where are they? Are they even located on Earth? Because it seemed that they travelled to space at one point. But I just felt like it shouldn't have been that confusing, and I just felt that I didn't care about this character because I didn't really understand him. I didn't really care about the other characters around them because I didn't understand them. And I just didn't care to read that extra 40 pages. So I think it's important, if you're really not enjoying a book, don't force yourself to finish it. Because you've probably got loads more stuff on your TBR that's going to be more exciting. And I spent 3 days limping through this and thought, I'm not going to spend a 4th day. I'm just not doing it. So yeah, I know that this has been around for a really, really long time now, because this book is 40 years old. This book is 40 years old. There's obviously a lot of people that like it. It's meant to be one of the sci-fi classics. Personally, I'm glad I did not read this first in my sci-fi journey, because if it had, it would have put me off sci-fi totally. But obviously I've read some other stuff since that from sci-fi, like by Isaac Asimov, that's made me see that I do like that genre. I'm just not really interested in this sort of thing. So yeah, I'm going to class the challenge point as done, which is read a book from where the main character's main job is in IT, because I've done that. I didn't need to finish the other 40 pages to say I've done that. I've given it a good go. It just didn't really work for me. So the next book I picked up, I decided to go with the challenge point, which was read a library book, because obviously I think when you're reading a book that you don't enjoy, you spend several days, trying to get your head around it, sort of trying to make yourself enjoy it, and it can put you in a reading slump. So I thought the library book one was really a good challenge point to do next, because then the opportunity of what that could be is endless, really. Now, I say opportunity could be endless. Every single book over the last few weeks that I've searched for on my local library has not been there. Like, they just simply don't carry it. Or they carry it in another library close by, but they don't do an interlibrary thing, even though it's all part of the same district. So I don't really understand that. However, the other week I had met author Nuzo Unu, and I'd asked her what was her favourite horror novel, and she told me that The Memory Police by Yoko Ogawa, I don't know if you can see that, was her favourite horror book. So I was quite intrigued to pick that up and read it, and I was really happy that my library actually had it. So this is probably the best thing that I read this week. I thought that it was a really interesting concept. So in this book, we don't learn the name of the lady who we're following. So it's a first person perspective. We're following this woman, and essentially she lives on this island. She doesn't have any close family. The closest people in her life are this old man, which she calls the old man, and her editor, which she calls R. And they sort of talk to each other, are in each other's life, but she doesn't really have anything to do with anybody else. So this island that they're living on is controlled by this authoritarian regime called the Memory Police, and essentially the Memory Police decide something needs to disappear, so they're going to say, like, oh, today we don't have cars, and then cars will disappear, and then actually after the object has disappeared, then people's memory of that thing also begins to disappear. Now, I find it a really, really interesting concept. I do think from having read the book, this is not really about authoritarian control. And I don't think it's actually really about the memory police either. I think it's more about losing your memory. So, like, for how it might be for people with dementia or people with brain-related injuries where they lose knowledge of things that have been in their life for quite some time, and then all of a sudden it's like it doesn't exist. There's this hole in their memory, you know. So I think that this book is an allegory for that. This was actually nominated as well for the International Booker Prize. I think it was 2020 when this was nominated. It didn't win, but I could see like why it would have got nominated. I think that the subject matter that our author has tried to write about is really difficult subject matter, and I think that she handled it really, really well. And I really enjoyed the prose in this book. I thought that, you know, it was a beautiful read, and I definitely want to read this book again if I'm honest. However, I'm not scoring it a 5, I'd only score it a 4-star, and the reason for that is just simply there are too many unexplained plot holes in this book. So I can't really get into them without giving the story away, and I wouldn't want to give the story away because I do recommend this book. I think it's a really, really good read. But I also feel like I feel quite strongly about this book and the subject matter that it's trying to cover. So I would like to do a separate deep dive into this book and do a separate video for that, and then, you know, we can discuss these plot holes and think, actually, are these really plot holes or am I just overlooking something? So yeah, I won't have time to film the video for that on this side of the new year, if I'm honest. So basically look out in January for a video where I'll do a more in-depth discussion of the memory police. But I was really, really pleased with the recommendation to read this book, and I think that this book saved me this week, giving me something that I actually really, really did enjoy reading, you know. And even with plot holes, as I said, I would still read it again, and I would look for other stuff that this author has written, because I just thought she wrote it beautifully. So after that, we managed to cross off 2 points off the reading challenge. So I decided to, well, I actually had 5, not 4. I decided to go for the one that was I had to read a book that I bought from the Oxfam bookshop. Now I have 3 books on my shelves that I could pick from. There was The Woman in the Window, which I've watched on Netflix. There was The Maidens by Alex Michaelides, and then I also have Caledonian Road by Andrew O'Hagan, I think his name is. Now that was just far too big for me to read to get in this week for that challenge point. And I was very tempted to do The Woman in the Window because I did enjoy the Netflix series, but then I thought maybe I'll go for something that actually I don't know, because I might enjoy that more. I was sort of in the mood to read something that was totally new to me. So I decided to go with The Maidens by Alex Michaelides. Now, as far as I'm aware, this author has 2 other books out. He has The Silent Patient, which was a really, really, really popular book, I think somewhere around about 2019, possibly. And everybody was raving about that on the internet. And I have read that. I thought it was okay. I didn't personally find it a 5-star read. I thought it was probably about, you know, high 3s, maybe a 4. You know, I didn't like not enjoy it, but I just didn't find it as outstanding as everybody like made it out to be. But also I read quite a lot of thrillers, so I think if you read quite a lot of thrillers and you start getting used to what to look for as to like what the ending's going to be or what the twist is, you know, you begin to see them before they happen. Or maybe, you know, some twists that other people think, oh my god, that's amazing, you're just like, I've seen better, sort of thing. So I kind of feel like that's why I feel that way about The Silent Patient. There wasn't anything wrong with it. However, I also read The Fury earlier this year, which was his 3rd book out, and I was actually quite disappointed with that one. I felt a little bit let down by the ending and the twist, and I felt like I could see it coming as well, and I'd sort of wished it had been more intricate, and I felt like the author could have maybe done a better ending. So I was intrigued to see what I was going to get with The Maidens. how was it going to go. So in this story, we're following a psychotherapist called Mariana, and essentially her husband Sebastian has died about a year ago, so she's a widow, and her husband Sebastian had essentially been taking care, like unofficially adopted her niece called Zoe, because Zoe's parents both died when she was quite young, and Mariana had been an adult essentially when that happened, so she is quite involved in Zoe's life. And Zoe is at a college, university in London, and she's studying like Greek mythology, literature, that kind of thing, as part of her course. Essentially, one of the girls at her, like on her uni course, is found murdered, and so she's very, very upset about that. So she calls home to tell Mariana this, and Mariana then basically invites herself over to go and stay with Zoe and starts looking into how this murder has happened, and then from there more murders happen, and it, you know, so it goes on like that. Now, this is sort of classed as dark academia because it's happening at the university, and part of the drive for it is Greek mythology. So the Greek mythology plays like a large role in the settings of these murders, and that's what interested me about this book actually, because I thought, oh, I wonder how he's going to do that, and I think that he did that quite well actually. I did like that. What I couldn't really get with this book was I didn't like Mariana as a main character again, like, and I couldn't understand how it is she managed to insert herself into this murder investigation. She's a psychotherapist. The police didn't call her to get involved in this. She's just gone over there and started prodding around looking into stuff, and then somehow keeps trying to find people, you know, manages to find people on an official level to, you know, let her into a crime scene, which was just totally unbelievable, yet it happened multiple times. There's also a chief police officer in this who's really horrible to her, but he's a totally unlikable character as well, and just dismisses anything that she has to say about her findings, even though she, I mean, yes, she shouldn't be poking her nose in, but she does find some stuff that apparently the police have not found, and then they're totally not interested. And I didn't really like that dynamic, because I thought, well, it's almost like saying that the police are incompetent, but then she was never invited to go there and look at stuff in the first place, and then the police were sort of being stubborn in not listening to anybody else, you know, and yeah, that just bored me. Reading all that kind of like there just bored me, if I'm honest, and yeah, I just didn't understand that. And then, you know, you've got the university as well, the setting for that, which is quite interesting, but then there's a bit of a cliche, I think, with, you know, one of the university lecturers, and I found the twist okay, but a little bit unbelievable. One thing I will say though is, if you did like The Silent Patient, the universe that's happening, if you like that psychiatric hospital and the patient that was in The Silent Patient is actually mentioned in this, so sort of written it in the same vein, see what I mean? And it's interesting as well that our main character is a psychotherapist, because obviously in The Silent Patient, again, our main character is a therapist, I think, or one of the main characters is a therapist, working as a therapist. So I gotta be honest, like, I gave this a 3-star. It was an okay read, like it passed a couple of days. You know, it wasn't written badly. The prose was fine. But I think, you know, I wouldn't read this again, and maybe I was a little bit disappointed by the ending. I thought it would have been better, but, you know, not terrible, just not the best. Okay. So then after that, I managed to move on to This Is How You Lose the Time War. So this is a novella by Amal El-Mohtar and Max Gladstone. And this has won a ton of awards in the sci-fi community. And it was published in 2019. Now, I didn't actually buy this. I got given it free with some books that I'd ordered, and I got to select which book I wanted for free, and I thought, oh, this sounded interesting. So this is a love story which is happening basically during a time travelling event, was what I sort of understood from the synopsis of it. Now, in this, we're following an agent called Blue, who comes from the Garden faction, and an agent called Red, who comes from the Agency faction. Now, this book was really hard to understand. It was really hard to understand what was going on. It's essentially, you have one chapter which is sort of written looking at what Blue is doing, and then Blue might write a letter to Red, and then you'll have a chapter where we'll see Red receive that letter, we'll see what Red is doing, and then Red might then write a letter onto Blue, and it just keeps swapping like that. And essentially, these two operatives travel back and forth through time, from what I can tell, and they both control events in time. And you know, there's a war going on, because it says the Time War, and they are you know, opposite sides of the war, so they're like each other's you know, nemesis. What is not made clear to me in this book is I don't entirely understand what the war is about, what the objective of the war is. So I understand, like, the Garden faction is slightly more biological, and the Agency faction is slightly more technological. But it's not like a war between nature and technology, because even the biological faction is still technological to a certain extent. And they're obviously time travelling as well as the technological people. The Red character talks about, you know, watching this the Atlantis basically burn, and she said she's seen it many times. So it's not like we're looking at time as in just one linear strand of time. There's like multiple strands. So she's seen Athens collapse like over 20 times, and she's like, please don't invite me back to another one. But they do. So like, obviously I think a volcano went off in the time strand that she's in. So yeah, these two characters are time hopping across different, you know, up and down the time continuum, but also like across different versions of time, if you like Earth. So that in itself is very confusing, and I don't think that that is quite apparent at the start of the book. That sort of comes together later on in the book as you're getting into it. And it starts off where I think I can't remember who receives the first note, whether it's Red or Blue, but it's sort of a bit of a cheeky letter, I suppose. And then they carry on writing to each other, but my understanding is that these operatives would never have written to each other in the first place, so I can't really work out why they started writing to each other in the first place, was one. And then from the content of these letters, I can't work out why they actually fell in love with each other, like what it is about it. I don't know, I just don't understand their relationship. And then thirdly, even the way they're receiving the letter is not like standard, because it's not like they're just finding a letter hidden under a rock somewhere. It's like, from what I understand, like written in like a seed for a plant, so they have to eat the seed and then they'll absorb the letter or something. Or they'll see it written in the water, like the way the waves move or something. So it's very kind of like fractured in a way, like how they would actually receive communications from each other, and they didn't seem to obviously open them immediately. So some of them would be like, one would be keeping it for a year before they opened it, because she was afraid like that she was being watched by people, or like her boss, and she obviously would be done for treason. She was caught corresponding with the enemy. And they don't really give anything away about what the other faction is doing. A lot of it is just admiring each other. So yeah, they're doing a lot of admiration of each other, but I'm not entirely sure that's love. They obviously never really get to spend time together. So yeah, I just found the relationship a little bit hard to understand, and the means of communication a bit hard to understand. And even the characters in themselves, the way that they're described, you're unsure at first, like, are we talking about human beings, or what are we talking about? Because they seem to change their form. So sometimes they're more like an animal, and other times not. And then they're talking about technology that they've got implanted into them, so then you think, are they a cyborg? So I think from what I can tell, they're not human at all. They're some kind of cyborg, which is changing its outer layer depending on which time zone they're put into, which they need to go and complete a mission in. But again, this was not entirely clear to me at first. So I did feel like I spent a lot of this book thinking, what exactly is going on? I really had a similar feeling to it as I did with Neuromancer. There was a lot of stuff that was not really explained properly. And I did have to go on the internet and actually read what other people were saying about this book to try and fully inform myself about what was happening in this book, because I was a little bit confused. Now, it's I also don't really like the way it's written. So it's got very short, choppy prose, you know, and I don't really like that. I much prefer people use full proper sentences so I can actually truly understand what's going on. So yeah, I don't like fragmented prose really. So I'd say that I give this a 2.5. I think for me it improved in the second half of the book. I think at that point then I started to understand more what they were trying to say to each other, because even in the first half of the book, the letters, like, they're not really direct about what they're trying to say either in the first half of the book. So you're like, I don't understand why you like each other, because I don't understand how you can understand what you're actually saying to each other. Whereas in the second half of the book, it was a little bit clearer. So that was a bit of a nicer read. But no, I don't think I would read this again. However, I'm probably in a minority here because, as I say, this has won all kinds of awards and loads of people are really, really raving about it. It's just not for me. But I did manage to finish it. So. And then finally, I've got to be honest, because I was struggling a bit with this one, I did pick up another book that I just started reading on the side, which doesn't fulfill any of my reading challenge objectives. I just wanted to pick up something that was just easy for me to absorb, because obviously having the Neuromancer sort of gave me a headache when I was trying to read that, and I kind of had the same thing with This Is How You Lose a Time War as well. It was giving me a headache while I was trying to read it, so I just needed something that was a little bit easier. So I was reading these short stories called The Other Side of Never, which is edited by Marie O'Regan and Paul Kane. So there's 18 stories in here, all by different authors, and it's exploring the dark side of Peter Pan. So they've all written short stories in this book, interpreting Peter Pan in a variety of dark ways. Now, I've read the first 3 stories, and I did like the third one. The third one, what was that called? Fear of the Pan Child. I did think that one was really, really good. I don't know that I was that keen on the first 2, but Fear of the Pan Child was really, really good, so that sort of encouraged me to probably dip into this a little bit over the next week. Now, I don't know that I'll finish this before New Year. I might, but my objective for next week is to finish off the last objective on the reading challenge, which is read a book that has won the Women's Prize for Fiction. So I'm really positive about that one, because I really enjoy the Women's Prize for Fiction book. So I think in a way I've saved that one till last, so I can have a really, really good read. Because obviously this week we've got Christmas, we've got a lot of holiday days, you know, so I want to be reading something that I'm actually really, really enjoying, and not trying to sort of force myself to read a book just for a reading challenge point. So in a way I'm happy this week because I've managed to get through quite a few reading challenge points, and now I'm only down to 1 point. And I've read the Memory Police as well, which I did actually really, really enjoy that book, and I think that, you know, there's more to discuss from that, and I look forward to discussing that in the video. But yeah, I'll be honest, I've had quite a few headaches from what I've read in this last week as well. So let me know how your reading week has been in the comments below. Have you had some pretty bad reads as well, or have you had all good reads? And what are your plans for reading over the Christmas period? You might not even get to do much reading. I don't think I'm going to get to do much reading. I think I'll probably be able to finish off the Women's Prize for Fiction point, but I'm not actually sure if I'll be able to read beyond that, but that's absolutely fine because I've had a cracking reading year, and I'm just looking forward to spending time with family over the Christmas period. So I hope you've enjoyed this video, even though obviously I've been a bit negative towards a few of the books that I've read, but I mean, that is the nature of reviewing books, you don't like them all. So if you've liked this video, please press like, and if you'd be interested in any of my further videos, please press subscribe. This week we've got another 2 videos coming up. On Christmas Day I've got a video which is talking about the highlights of my reading in 2025 and also the lowlights of my reading in 2025. Just gives you a couple of stats on that. And then on Boxing Day I have another video coming out which is talking specifically about Stephen King books that I've read in 2025 and how I feel about those. Okay, so we won't have our weekly catch up next Monday. I think we'll probably have that on Tuesday or Wednesday when the end of the month has actually come. So that makes more sense than doing it on Monday just before the month has ended. So next Monday I'm going to post a video where I'm going to talk about what my reading goals are for next year. So thank you for watching this video and I hope you come and join me on another one soon. Bye!